Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. I am Fareed Ahmed, and we are live at Youth Matters. And with me today is Professor Dr. Shoaib Ahmed Malik from UAE. He is professor in religion and science, right? Something like that. What's your
Something like that.
subject?
I teach physics, chemistry, mathematics, but I research in Islamic studies and philosophy.
Okay,
Can you hear
so
me?
yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Perfect. Okay, so the topic for today's discussion is ask away. And before we have the audience asking us the questions, my first question to you is that we have heard a lot of this term, which is Islamic militancy, right?
Mm.
Or militants in Islam. Is there something that can we can call to be an atheist militancy, or can there be militants in atheism as well?
Mhm. All right. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you very much, Fareed, for inviting me and the Youth Club for organizing this event. I wanted to say, first and foremost, with regards to your question, militancy is an attitude, and an attitude can manifest in many different ways. You can definitely have Islamic militancy, but you can also have Christian militancy, atheist militancy. It is not a category that is restricted to any group, right? So militancy in of itself, however you want to define that, can manifest in various ways and shape and forms. And you can look at history, you can look at sociology to be able to make this point. Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Brain, don't run, don't run.
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
I'm having a problem again in listening to you. Can you listen me?
I can listen to you. Can you listen to me?
Okay, but I think people can listen to you. Let me remove you again. I think the moment I attach my headphones, your sound goes away. Okay, so
All right, okay.
let me add you again. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now. Okay. So this was it. My second question to you is that I have an idea that what you must have said. Okay, this new phenomenon of atheism, when did it exactly went on the peak, and how did it started emerging?
Right. Historically speaking, atheism has had a very long past. I mean, we have records. I mean, guesswork records of people rejecting gods even back 2,000-3,000 years ago. The difference is, however, that atheism as a movement, as a collective movement, did not come to fruition until probably the past 20th century. This is when the movement really kicked off, and it's kicked off alive and well, particularly in the past 20 years with the rise of new atheism. Atheism is pretty much, it was usually restricted to individuals before. Now it's gone up to the size of nationalities. So, for example, communist China, for instance, right? We even had histories of episodes of in the past with the world wars. The atheist has now manifested it no longer into pocket individuals. It is now a very big political and national player. So it's definitely something that has gained critical mass in the recent stage. But before then, it was really, very isolated individuals in history. At least that's what we can tell so far.
And what are some of the causes, especially in Pakistan, why people tend to become atheist? I mean, they are born in Muslim families. They have Muslims all over around them. We are not in a state where people are non-Muslims. Majority of us are Muslims. So, what is one of the reason, or some of the few reasons, why people have this tendency of studying atheism and then believing in that to be ultimate truth of life?
The reasons for people, atheism, people joining atheism or leaving Islam, there's a host of stuff involved in here. There are intellectual reasons, there's non-intellectual reasons. I'm going to give you examples of both. If intellectually, sometimes people find science to be the end all and be all of everything. So when they start taking science, they see that it conflicts with Islam a lot. So that becomes a means, and especially if people are not trained in theology, they don't know their basic foundations, and then automatically religion becomes very questionable. So I hear it, for example, some Muslims, particularly today, evolution is a big question. Evolution in Islam, for instance, is a big one, right? So the moment somebody will go to a university, they'll study evolution, or they'll study philosophy, and they'll see, oh, it automatically defeats Islam. We don't need this anymore. So there are intellectual reasons involved. Another issue is when people think they can become their own experts very quickly. So some individuals, they will try to understand Hadith and Quran. And rightfully so. I understand the motivation why some people want to take this on themselves, not listen to ulama scholars, because sometimes ulama or sometimes sheikhs, they say some things that create a negative reaction, particularly in Pakistan. Mullah hai, mullahs don't have this image in Pakistan as well, right? So for that reason, people take it on themselves to learn about Islam. And of course, when you go into Hadith in particular, Hadith is a big problem. If you don't understand usul hadith, if you don't understand the Arabic, it's this is the best fuel for atheism if you want to kind of distort Muslims. You take the hadith and spread it everywhere without context, without narrative, and that's what causes the doubts to seed up. So these are intellectual reasons. I would say the non-intellectual stuff are things like sociology and psychology. So for instance, there are these two books. So I have a monograph called Atheism and Islam. And in that, there's a section I've written on why Muslims leave Islam. And there are two books that I reference that talk about the sociology of people leaving Islam. And they mention several reasons in there. One of them is, for instance, people leave Islam because they see hypocrites in their family, right? So, the father or the mother is very well respected in the community, right? But when they come home, they beat their child, they drink behind the scenes, etc. So hypocrisy plays a big part, right? Another angle is when a trauma hits them, some kind of existential crisis happens to them. So they feel that Islam is not enough. So there was one girl, for instance, in one of those books, she said when she saw the 9/11 bombing, right? She cannot believe this was Islam. So she left Islam, right? So all these are hosts of reasons why people leave Islam and go towards atheism.
Okay, we do understand from a Western perspective that they need to study a lot of material to become atheist, right? Mm-hmm. But in particularly with you have been to Pakistan and you have visited several universities as well. What we find is that they don't know the inside out of atheism. So first you need to teach them what atheism is, and then you need to refute them, right? For me, it's more like, according to my observation, it's more like emotional stuff which goes around in their life.
That happens.
What is your sincere advice to such people who are facing this dilemma of atheism?
People who are going through it emotionally?
Yeah, emotionally, or who are becoming agnostic.
Well, I think for emotionally, you have to find out what is the cause of the emotion, right? So if you have an individual who believes that all Muslims are hypocrites because she was in a Muslim family and she was beaten by her father, right? Now, of course, psychologically, that's hard to detach yourself from, because in her mind now, Islam means aggression. That's what it means, right? So slowly you provide the only way to kind of counter that is you provide the alternative. You show in your character that, Islam is not about aggression. Islam is not about that, right? You show the alternative. And those emotional elements slowly get distracted or diluted over time. But the idea is, if they have had a bad experience or an emotional experience, provide the emotional experience that's then positive to reinforce what you're saying. Because if intellect is not going to do it, then at least your actions might do it.
Okay. So you think that atheism, there are so and so causes of atheism, okay, and we discuss it. What is the role of different professors or who are agnostic teaching in universities of Pakistan, who are very passionate about making people atheist? I mean, what's the psychology behind that? Why are there so much anti-religion?
I think it comes back down to Mullahism, like they will see that Islam is regressive. Islam is taking people back to the Stone Age, right? I think one of the biggest examples is someone like Professor Hoodboy. He's I'd say the number one reference in Pakistan, right? So I've actually written about Professor Hoodboy. I've reviewed his book, which he wrote back in 1986, Islam and Science. And in there, he basically believes that, this is a very common idea that some scientists have is that Imam Ghazali, who's a big historical scholar, he rejected sciences, and since then everything has left the Muslim world. So for that reason, things are problematic. And he unfortunately does not know Imam Ghazali. He hasn't read Imam Ghazali. In fact, in a debate in University of Berkeley, somebody corrected him that this is a misconceived idea about Imam Ghazali. So I feel that in their minds, they hate religion. So he's secularist. He's a complete secularist, right? So he doesn't want anything to do with religion in his worldview. And he believes that if people start adopting religion, the society will go back. Now, fundamentally, he's an educator, right? He wants to see the Pakistan succeeding. So his motivation is that, okay, how do we get Pakistan at number one? We have talent. I recently saw his videos. We have the talent. We have the geniuses. He himself says, I have had students who've gone to, Western institutions. They've gotten scholarships. But if we go to religion, that will slow down. So that is his agenda here. But the problem here is that you can have equally a religious person, but also a scientist at the same time. But for him, these two do not mix.
But for a lot of people, science and religion are two different poles, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are not united. They are in contradiction to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Why do people think so? I mean, people do bring out a lot of theories and arguments that go against the religion itself, let it be Islam or Christianity. Because your expertise is religion and science, both of them. If I talk only with regards to a Muslim perspective, why is it that people want to, blend evolution and Islam all together, so that, that makes sense of both of them? So they are okay with the Darwinian evolution as well, and they are also okay with the creation of Adam alayhi salam as the first person.
Mm-hmm. See, I think it comes back down to the principles of your religion, right? I think that many people, unfortunately, because they're not trained, if you don't have a solid theology background, it's everyone's game after that, right? So I came from a very hardcore science background. So the idea of miracles didn't make sense to me initially. The idea of souls really didn't make sense to me. But then when I started studying these things, then it started making sense how you can navigate these two territories. The problem is when you just study science, the Quran just collects dust in most people's houses. It's there as a decoration piece, right? I'm just saying for some. I'm not saying everybody. I'm just generalizing here, right?
Yes.
So when that happens, when you have that, right, what ends up happening is that they will take whatever science is to be correct, and everything that is religion is, we can dismiss it. So, for example, when it comes to the problem of miracles, right? People will deny miracles because they believe it conflicts with science. So they'll either say the Quran is totally incorrect, or some of these portions of the Quran are incorrect, right? So that happens. Or, for example,
Dr. Shoaib, I would like to add another question, that from an Islamic perspective, we know what a miracle is, right?
Yeah.
But from a scientific perspective, how do you define the miracle?
Miracles don't exist in science. In science, you have to assume that there are regularities in nature. Yeah, you assume regularities in nature. So, if, for example, if I have this cup, I drop this cup, the law of gravity forces it to go down. It cannot go left, cannot go right, cannot go up, has to go down. These are fixed regularities in nature, right? Now, if that is a fixed regularity, so whether I dropped it yesterday, whether I drop it now, whether I drop it tomorrow, it should be the same, right? So there is that presumption that scientists have that regularities are fixed. So tomorrow, this can never go up. This is the presumption that they have. And in philosophy of science in particular, you will study this. This is known as induction. Induction. Yeah. And the problem here is that because they believe this is an inviolable rule, you cannot eliminate or violate this rule. For them, the idea of miracles is bogus, because miracles means what? That the laws of nature have momentarily changed. They have gone beyond what they are supposed to do. For example, no scientist today will accept that the staff of Moses will become a snake, or when the seas part, that's due to a miraculous. No one will accept that. So and unfortunately, this has crossed over into the Muslim mindset as well. So what do some Muslims do? They will say that all of these are metaphors. But in the Quran and Hadith, there's some things that you are allowed to take literally, right? Unless and otherwise there's excuse to do so, right?
Yeah,
according to the rules of tafsir. So this is what happens when science becomes scientism. So these are two different things. Science is a methodology, and within every methodology, there are rules, prescriptions, and a scope of things. But we don't make that into a worldview. Scientism, however, is the ideology when you believe that everything can be answered through the prism of science. That is scientism. And
Which is not true.
sorry? Yeah,
Which
of course
is not
it's not
true.
true. Of course it's not true.
Why isn't it true for the general audience? Why isn't it true? That why
Sure.
can't we have scientism as the benchmark?
The reason why we can't have scientism as the benchmark is because scientism is self-defeating. If you believe, there are many contradictions within it, but fundamentally, if you believe that science is able to address everything, the claim itself is unscientific. You did not do an experiment to prove that. You just presume that. You believe in that. And even this idea that the world is governed by, these uniform laws, that is not a scientific claim. That is a philosophical claim. You presume that. So that automatically indicates that if there are things that science cannot look into, cannot suggest, cannot prove, then there must be things that are beyond science. And that's why scientism is something Muslims do not accept, but they do accept science.
Okay, in our society, we recently had a debate on whether evolution is a part of Islam or whether it's not a part of Islam. And with that, I mean Darwinian evolution.
Yeah.
As a layman, as a student of language, not a student of science, right? How do you define Darwinian evolution, and what was the Darwin's real claim about evolution? Did he address how were we all created?
Right. Okay. So, you want me to summarize evolution?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So evolution is a very simple concept, but unfortunately it gets very muddled quite quickly because of non-experts talking about it. This is the main reason, right? Evolution has three principles behind it. Number one, the first principle is the universe and Earth is really old. The universe is 14.6 billion years old. Earth is around 4.6 billion years old, right? So that's the first principle. Second principle of evolution is that you know how you have a family tree. So you are connected to your mother and father, that they're connected to their mother and father, and on and on and on and on, right? So all of that is a family tree. Evolution simply says that is extended not just to human beings, but to everything. So humans, they are connected to these pre-species, and all those species are connected. So eventually, if you look at the history of life, you can come up with a massive family tree that connects us all together. That's what evolution says. Third point, and now this is the mechanics. How did this play out? How did this mechanism play out? Fundamentally, Darwin said this: natural selection and random mutations. These are the driving forces of evolution. Now, what does that mean, right? Let's talk about random mutations first. All of us, we have a DNA, a blueprint in us, right? And that DNA is responsible for manifesting who you are. So there's some DNA, for example, that codes the color of your hair. So I have black, right? Some people might have brown hair. So that information is stored in the DNA, right? So what happens is if you now have people having offspring or animals having offspring over billions of years is not a short time. It's a massive, massive, massive time, right? If you have billions of years, sometimes there are copying errors in the mutation, or sometimes when there's offspring, the gene changes. And if you have several gene changes over a period of billions of years, you get all these different species that come out, right? Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to get half animal, a half horse, or half human. That doesn't exist. You only
why don't they exist?
Right. Okay. So this is a very good question. So the thing is, the mutation can only affect on the template that is available. So for instance, this is an analogy that I use for my students, right? You know Lego blocks? Yeah, Lego blocks, yeah? And imagine if you have a castle made out of Legos, right? A castle made out of Legos. Now, the teacher says to the students, all of you come in a line, and one by one, you come to the castle. And you have three options. You either change a piece, remove a piece, or add a piece. You cannot do anything more than that. Change, remove, or add. Only one of these three, okay? Now, the first student comes, adds something. Second comes, remove something, etc., etc. And whenever, if you see that, if the teacher takes a photo, you can see a historical line, right? Now, according to the rules that the teacher prescribed, you can only change what is given to you. Does that make sense? You cannot
Right.
completely separate the castle into a half. You cannot do that, right? There are laws in the classroom that the teacher has prescribed. Similarly here, in evolution, based on the genetic material that is already there, you can only change so much. Does that make sense, right? Because
No,
mutations.
but from if we talk about the start of it, okay, there were not a lot of different templates, right?
Mhm.
It generally evolved, right?
What do you mean the start of it? When you say start of
Yeah.
it, what do you mean by that?
The start of the common ancestor or the one species that was there.
Oh, right. So, in terms of what is the first species, I mean, it could be simple bacteria. We don't know. It could be simple viruses. I have no clue, but I think most likely it will be a bacteria species that they will find out. The oldest species we've discovered so far is 3.5 billion years old. But perhaps that doesn't mean that's the first species. It just means that's the earliest one we have discovered. Regardless of the way it came about, remember, evolution does not describe origins. Origin of life is not something that evolution discusses, right? It's like me explaining to you, I want you to take your physics and tell me how my heart works. It doesn't happen. Physics, theories of general relativity don't explain your heart. It's a misapplication of the theory.
So basically, what you are saying is, okay. So for people, you are good in Punjabi, right?
Yeah.
And you don't know Urdu. So basically, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਪਏ ਹੋ ਕਿ Darwinian evolution, it doesn't talk about the origin of creations,
Life.
right?
Bilkul.
Okay. What it talks about is that how our different creations evolved, right? That is what we call about the micro and the macro evolution. Okay. Now, we as Muslims believe in microevolution, and according to my understanding, that there's evolution from a same branch of species, right? An elephant can't turn into a cat by evolving, right? So it has to be from the same branch of species. Is this my understanding correct?
So far, yep.
Okay. So how is it that how can we say that this Islam, which talks about the creation of Adam alayhi salam, and be in aligned with this theory of evolution? So we have to choose one of them.
Right. Okay.
Is
So
this the matter?
it's a what? Sorry.
Is this the matter that either we have to choose the Quranic narrations or the text, or we have to choose the Darwinian evolution? And there's a brother. Let's take his question as well. He says that can we believe in common ancestry and be Muslims? Okay.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, Musa, very good question, and I will answer both of what you asked in one go, inshallah. Okay. So remember, I just want to make sure for people who are just coming in, keep the 3 principles of evolution in mind. Deep time, universe is really old. Common ancestry, we're all connected through a family network. And the process of evolution is natural selection and random mutation. This is new Darwinian. This is new Darwinian evolution, right? Now, putting that aside for a second, can Muslims accept evolution, or do they have to reject one or the other? This is the bottom line question, right?
Yeah.
Now, the discussion about Islam and evolution it was very weak in the beginning. It is now significantly developed. Alhamdulillah, we are now getting many different proposals. And now I think I've at least identified at least 28 different opinions on the spectrum. In terms of, so as Muslims, we believe we have something called Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. That is what we have. That is what defines us as a Sunni Muslim, right? Now, within that scope, what are you allowed to believe or not? This is what I will be addressing. That is according to this. If you're not outside, if you're not in this, then that's a different question. But inside this scope, this is the answer, right? There are currently 2 proposals that are able to reconcile the two. There are 2 proposals, okay? Both of them are by theologians. And personally, for me speaking, because I'm writing even a book on Islam and evolution, after exhausting all the literature, these 2 make the most sense. The first one is by Yas al-Qadi, right? Now, Yas al-Qadi, he has a very interesting perspective. He simply says, now we believe Adam alayhi salam, he was created without mother, without father, up there in heaven. He came Jannah.
Okay. Yeah.
He came down, but he came down miraculously, poof, like just instantaneously. That is a miracle. We don't project that whatsoever. Lekin, his biology is exactly what we would expect if evolution was true. Matlab, jo bhi genetic code hame chahiye na, to make sure that the sequence is matching up, he has it. If he needs a certain type of DNA, he will have it. If he needs a certain type of body, he will have it. So that from a scientific perspective, remember, science is blind to miracles, right? Science is completely blind. Scientists will never know that this is a miracle, right? For them, it's seamless continuation. But Sheikh Yasir Qadi says that the Quran informs us what science cannot. Because remember, science is limited. But Allah tells us He can change these laws, and this guy is a miracle. Adam alayhi salam is a miracle. Done. This is the first.
Okay, please continue. Please continue. Then I'm going to summarize for the audience.
Okay, no, you can summarize the first one. This is the first one.
Okay, so according to what I've understood from talking to you is that we as Muslims will not have any problem or should not have any problem if someone says that, lion came through evolutionary process. It might be true, it might be not true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
But we Muslims will object strongly if someone says that, Adam alayhi salam came from this evolutionary process who had mother and father. Is this my understanding right?
Yeah. We cannot compromise on Adam alayhi salam having a mother and father. This is something
okay.
that
What if someone from his own research says that, probably Adam alayhi salam had a father and a mother, but he was given the consciousness at that particular moment. Okay.
Right. Okay. So this is definitely a valid perspective, and in the sense that somebody can say, okay, how about this solution? It would have made sense, but there are some verses that do not permit this reading. Those verses are the tamthil. For example, the verse where Adam alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam in Surah Imran, verse number 59, they are compared, where Allah says Adam is like Jesus, right? He says those two are equivalent, right? Now, they could say, okay, maybe both of them are miraculous creations. What's the problem with that? But if you look at the surah, right, you cannot look at verses in isolation. You have to look at the verses before and after, the history behind the verse, etc. Again, coming back down to training in how you interpret texts. That verse only makes sense if you believe that Adam. So the context of that verse, let me first explain. The context of that verse is a Christian was talking to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ, why don't you become a Muslim? And he, I think, kind of rejected the answer. And they said, I know why you don't, because he said three things. One of them is because you believe that Jesus did not have a father. Then this verse came down, right? So in the context, it means that if you believe Jesus did not have a father, well, we have Adam. Here we have Adam who did not have mother and father. So how are you giving divinity? How are you giving ilahiyat to Jesus and not to Adam, right? That's a contradiction. The verse came to explain that narrative, the contradiction in that narrative. So that is why to say that Adam as salam had a mother and father and then the consciousness came, some ulama have done that. Some ulama, they have done that. For example, Dr. Shoaib Ahmed, he had this position. This was his opinion, right? But this verse does not allow it as such. If you take in context, Surah Imran and the Asbab al-Nuzul.
So for the audience understanding, just a second. You are talking about this verse, right? Can you see this verse?
Yes.
So this is the verse that we're talking about, that indeed the example of Jesus to Allah is like that of Adam. He created him from dust, and then he said to him, be, and he was, right?
Yeah.
So this is the verse that we are talking about. And according to this verse, it's not possible that Adam alayhi salam may have his parents, his mother and father. Because, then there would be no comparison. Then we all are like Adam alayhi salam if we had to have parents, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for clarification. Let's take another question from him.
Wait. So that was one solution. I didn't say the other solution.
Okay.
Proposal, right?
Okay.
The second proposal. After this, I'm just going to quickly go pray for 5 minutes, right?
Sure.
The second proposal is by David Solomon Jalajal, right? And he's a very good friend of mine as well, mashallah. He actually mentioned this quite clearly. He has a book called Islam and Evolution, according to Islamic tradition, right? He has this book. It's available. You can find it online. So this book, he argues very simply that the Quran and Hadith are clear. Adam had no parents. Crystal clear, right? However, the Quran is completely silent. Yani matlab, there is no indication whatsoever of there being humans on earth before he came down from heaven. Okay, but what does this mean? It means this, that that we cannot compromise on Adam having parents. Lekin, the Quran doesn't either say nor negate of there being human beings on earth. Doesn't negate it nor affirm it. So, for example, he gives the similarity of the dinosaurs. The Quran doesn't mention dinosaurs, nor does it negate dinosaurs. So whether you believe in dinosaurs or not is irrelevant, right? So if it's irrelevant, it's okay whether you believe it or don't believe in it. But in the case of other human beings on earth, the Quran neither affirms it nor negates it. So therefore, there could have been other human beings on earth, and Adam just came down and discussed with them or whatever have you. He mingled with them. But our nasab, our lineage comes from him. But in the Quran, it nowhere negates that there are other human beings on earth. Nowhere does it negate that. So both of them within Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah are possible. Those are the two possibilities in terms of recognized science. In this one, the second solution, those human beings could have come from evolution, if that perspective is true. So in that perspective, yes. In Yasir Qadhi's perspective, human beings, because he believes that human beings start with Adam. That's Yasir Qadhi's position. In that position, that you cannot accept that humans came out of evolution. But in David's position, you can. So these are the two slightly different perspectives that come under Ahl Sunnah.
But what is the scholarly view, the classical scholars that were over there? How did they view this?
Well, the classical scholars never dealt with evolution, right? They never had this question. So if you're talking about classical scholarship, you will find opinions that were available at that time. So for instance, this is a question that many people think about. So many people think that Adam was created in heaven, right? This seems to be a very predominant opinion, right? We did a 20 tafsir list from the very first, tafsirs till now, up to modern time, over the past 1400 years. And we found out there is, in fact, no conclusive opinion where Adam was born, whether he was born up there or here. No conclusive opinion whatsoever. There's some things, tafsirs are fixed, right? Some tafsirs are fixed. They have a clear opinion. But on some issues, there are probabilities, and it's not clear which one is correct, right? So, and one of those issues in which Mufassirin disagreed over is the location of where Adam was created. Some Mufassirin said he was created in Jannah, in heaven. Some said he was created on earth. And Ibn Ashur, he's a very famous scholar in the past 20th century. He very clearly said it, that most of the people follow that he was created up there in Jannah, but both of these positions are plausible. But more importantly, and this is the most important thing he said, in terms of aqidah, in terms of what makes you a Muslim, this question doesn't matter. Whether you believe in this and that, it doesn't take you outside the fold of Islam. That's the point.
Okay, so if I go back to his question, this one, in yes or no, can we believe in common ancestry and be Muslims? Yes or no?
There's no yes or no. You can believe in non-human common ancestry, but not necessarily human ancestry. That's the
Okay. So for the audience, Dr. Shoaib has to go and offer his prayer. He'll be back in 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Most likely. We are not going to don't log out. Okay, so you may go.
Yeah, just 2 minutes.
Okay, so fine. So I'm here. If you so please, we won't get this opportunity again. Post as many questions as you want. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Okay, so so the last question was that whether one can be Muslim or not, and it doesn't have any answer in yes or no, right? Okay, another question is, can Darwinism explain Lamarckism because there are epigenetic changes that acquire and transferred in generations?
Right.
So, for audience, he's a student of biotechnology, genetic sciences, I think. So
Right. So to answer this question, there are some changes that are passed over to the offspring that are not necessarily in your genes, and these are called epigenetics. Right. This is what he's referring to. Now, epigenetics. There's a discussion now about whether neo-Darwinism is correct or not, in the sense that is natural selection and random mutations, are they enough to explain the mechanics of evolution? Now, because of new discoveries like epigenetics, Evo, Devo, and other things that are out there, all it's doing is forcing scientists to perhaps, it's still not, there's still no consensus on this, to perhaps revise the mechanics of evolution, right? This is the most important point, to revise the mechanics of evolution. But none of the scientists believe that common ancestry is out of the window. Remember, I told you that the three things that define evolution: deep time, that the universe and Earth is really old, common ancestry, and the mechanics. The only thing that is being revised right now is this one right here, common ancestry, which is the most important thing for Muslims. That's the red light for Muslims, right? That isn't being questioned. It is only this third one. So regardless whether Darwinism is able to explain epigenetics or not is irrelevant for us from a theological angle. Scientifically, if you're curious, go ahead, do the research. But theologically, it is irrelevant.
Okay, Dr. Shoaib, you are also a student of history, and I know that you're very expert in this field. A lot of Muslims claim that, Darwinian evolution is popular because it went against church, right? And including Dr. Zakir Naik, he says that, it's not because of its merits, but because it was against the church. And in that particular scenario, it got fame. How far is this claim true?
This is a completely bogus narrative. Completely bogus, right? It makes no sense whatsoever. In fact, many people might be surprised to know that when Darwin first proposed it, many people rejected it. Many people rejected it, right? And the reason why they rejected it is because they felt that the randomness in his process is it completely, it removes any purposeness in reality. Because if Darwinian evolution is true, it makes you think, wow, are we just one lucky accident? If everything is created by random processes, we were luckily created on Earth then, right? So the idea in Christianity, because remember, the idea of being able to see purposes in nature is very important to them, right? In their theology. So when you say that, hang on, everything is now random based, it completely questions that paradigm. So it was rejected, and that's why in his time there were many other alternatives that people were looking at before his finally got accepted, because the science could not explain anything else except for Darwinism. So the idea that it was against the church and he's an atheist, he's a Jew, and all of that is completely bogus. There is no historical basis to this whatsoever.
Okay, but I've heard Brother Subur saying that Darwinism is popular because there is no parallel theory to it. Okay,
right?
That's the only theory science has it. Okay, that's why it's more popular. If there were multiple theories on this subject, so maybe this theory was not as concrete as it seems to be right now.
Right. What Subur has said, I don't know. Right. I can't comment on that. Right. All I can tell you is, based on my reading, in 1859, when he first published his book, it was rejected by most scientists. That's the first thing. Okay. Over time, there were at least about 6 theories in place. Read in the works of Peter Bowler, Peter Bowler, Bowler. He has written several fantastic books on the history of evolution. If you follow his account, at least 6 theories were around, right? And only Darwinism came as the evolutionary orthodoxy by the 1940s and 30s, once genetics came into the picture, because that led to the best explanation. Now, like I said, today, come to the 21st century, is there discussion over the mechanics of evolution? Yes. Will neo-Darwinism maybe lose force? Possible. Completely possible. But the key point is, what is being rejected? The mechanics or common ancestry? It's only mechanics. The problem for Muslims still remains, which is common ancestry.
Okay, we take another question. Okay, there was a question that I already took. Sister says that, how do you take this criticism of Dr. Pervez Hoodbhoy that without understanding evolution, Muslims cannot achieve scientific development? So please shed light on the political spectrum of evolution science. So a lot of people say that, if you don't know evolution, it's most likely that you're living in jungles and you're not using any gadgets and you can't progress. Mm-hmm. Is this evolution the ultimate source of knowledge? After that, a person can only progress, or can we still progress in other domains of life without knowing this theory?
Right. I think the only reason why this statement is being made is because this is one of the most discomforting questions in Islam, right? Because of the creation narrative. Do Muslim scientists need to know evolution? Yes, it's part of their field, it's part of the discipline. Your antibiotics, which you get every year, is based on principles of evolution, right? The medicine that is developed to cure you is based on evolution. Most of the founding principles that govern biology are based on it. Could it be revised later on? Yes. There's one guy who's a Christian evolutionist, and he criticizes, for example, intelligent design, all of that. He made it very clear. If you want to get a Nobel Prize, he's clearly saying this to everyone. If you want to get a Nobel Prize, defeat evolution. He encourages people to go ahead and scientifically try to dispute evolution, and you will get the Nobel Prize, because then you will have completely created a paradigm shift. And what is the Nobel Prize? You change the human conception so radically because you have introduced something that we don't know from before. So go ahead and do that. Now, with regard to the second question that Sana has asked on the political spectrum of evolution, can you clarify what that means, Sana? Are you talking about how evolution has been instrumentalized politically? Or is it like in terms of how evolution has become a political game between atheists and theists? I'm not quite sure what your question is. If you can clarify, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, my question to you is, according to Darwinian evolution, the more children you have, the more successful you are. Okay, that's my understanding.
Right. Okay.
Then, on the other hand, from a political perspective, why people criticize and having a lot of children? I mean, I don't see a point. They accept some of the reality of the Darwinism, and then they reject some of them.
So what exactly the issue here is that natural evolution says you should have many kids, and then people get criticized when they have many kids?
So right. This is, I mean, I don't understand this mentality.
Right. I think this is now why people criticize people who have, a lot of kids. This is now social and cultural parts, right? And this will be, up to each society how they want to handle this issue. Perhaps there are cultural taboos and what have you. It doesn't really matter. But in terms of what evolution says, evolution simply says it doesn't talk about kids. It talks about genetic survival. That's what it says, that you replicate your genes. It has nothing to do necessarily with kids as long as your genes are passed along. That's the most important thing in evolution.
Okay. We have a question from Brother Osama. He says, is there any way that someone can come up with a method to prove Darwinism based on logic and reasoning only, without the use of empirical observation and induction?
That's like me saying, can you prove a computer exists without logic and reason? It's impossible. Can you prove gravity exists without observations? It's impossible. You have to use empirical observations, just like you have to use it for physics, chemistry, computing, engineering. If you question induction, you question everything else in the field in science.
But induction, I mean, this is the problem of induction because the sample size is limited. So maybe
but all sciences work on that. All science work on that. Engineering works on that. Electricity works on that. Gravity works on that. To criticize induction is to even criticize that your food will be edible tomorrow. Because how old are you, Brother Fareed? 30, 40?
Yeah,
mashallah.
I'm 31.
Yep. 31, mashallah. So you're 1 year younger than me, right? Okay, so that's to say, so you've been eating breakfast every day. Now, based on induction, your food will be edible tomorrow, but perhaps it might not be. Induction is what we are governed by. That is what makes us limited creation. Allah is the only one beyond induction. He has no inductive boundaries. We have inductive boundaries. Induction applies to everything humans do. So we have to be careful that in trying to criticize evolution, if we criticize induction, it will lead to radical skepticism. Radical skepticism.
Okay, Musab has asked a question again. It's a bit different from the topic, but is the concept of parallelism, parallel universes mentioned by classical scholars like Imam Ghazali and Razi? And I'd like to add another question to it, that suppose we find aliens tomorrow.
Yep.
Have they also gone through the same Darwinian evolution? I mean, who's going to be the common ancestor over there?
Right, okay. So with regards to Imam Ghazali and parallel universes, I don't think he's discussed that. Parallel universe is a very novel concept. It's a very novel concept. But I don't think this would have existed. But would they have an issue with such things existing? No. Right? They wouldn't have an issue with that. Because as long as it's permissible for God to do, he could create it if he wanted to. So this needs to be made very, very clear, right? Now to answer your question, Brother Fareed, If biology is governed by a set of principles, then we assume that those same principles are applicable everywhere else. So perhaps if we do encounter aliens, then it is very likely that they would be governed by evolution as well.
Okay. Another question. Hamid Mahmood says that, dear Siddhi, it's your name? Okay. Sheikh Dr.
Is a term, matlab bhai. It's like
Okay,
bhai.
okay, fine. Okay. When one of the earliest and only Sheikhul Islam of British ISIS, Sheikh Abdullah, gave a number of lectures in the first ever masjid of England in 1889 on Darwinian evolution, he supported it and did so especially because of it being anti-Christian. After that lecture on evolution, he actually converted a Christian to Islam. Now the question is, how do you feel about that?
Right. So, Abdullah Quilliam, for those people who don't know, Abdullah Quilliam is the first British convert, as far as we can tell, in UK, right? And Sheikh Abdullah Quilliam, you can find several books on him. Sheikh Hamid is actually doing a book on a particular person related to Sheikh Abdullah Quilliam. And he used to talk about science in the masajid a lot, right? Mineralogy, chemistry, geology, evolution was one of them. And his opinion was that there was no problem between evolution and Islam as such. So, and you can find these transcripts online. So, and that's what the brother is referring to here.
How do you feel about it? You didn't tell me how do you feel about it.
Oh, right. I'm okay with that. If that's what Abdullah Quilliam felt, no worries. It's absolutely fine. The key thing, I think this is an important thing to maybe look into, right? The key thing for Muslims, right, is we have to believe Adam was real. Adam cannot be a metaphor. That's the most important thing. Now, whether you believe he's a product of evolution or not, that doesn't take you outside the fold of Islam. That's the most important thing. We should never do takfir on people who believe that he came out of evolution, because that's the worst thing you can say to someone, right? Now, Sheikh Salman Yunus, he's mashallah, very young, bright sheikh from the UK. He clearly said, and I like his position, it makes perfect sense. The best you can say, okay, his reading of the Quran is wrong, but it doesn't mean he's not Muslim. And I think that's the best way to go. Allahu Alam.
We are nowhere in the position to do takfir of anyone.
Yeah.
We are no one. But one important thing is that it's very, very important for us Muslims to stick to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Because that is the group which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved from the hellfire, and there are high chances that if you have your own usul of different things, you're going to get deviated. So it's very important. We have another question. Assalamu alaikum. Research in antibiotic research is based on study of genetics and mutation regardless of understanding of origin of species, and does not require the assumption that all living beings are evolved from primitive organism and free of life.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, of course, when you zoom in onto genetics, right, we don't necessarily. It depends on what you're applying for. If you're looking at genetics in terms of, or in terms of medicine, for example, right, you don't need to presume common ancestry. But if you're looking at genetics, for instance, if you want to compare or look at phylogenetic trees or whatever have you, cladistics, of course you need to presume common ancestry. So it will depend from one microfield to another.
Do you agree that we all agree on the micro evolution? Okay. Do you agree that a lot of people, like some of the other people of your field, says that a lot of people, they present the arguments of micro evolution to prove the macro evolution?
First of all, you can find this in textbooks. There is no difference between micro and macro. It's just a matter of scale. Micro just means changes on genes, and those changes on genes means macroevolution, changes in species. So Muslims can comfortably believe in microevolution, and they can comfortably believe in macro if you believe in David Jalada's proposal. If you believe in Yasir Qadhi's proposal, then you cannot accept macroevolution for humans. For humans. Some ulama make a distinction. If they want to reject evolution or they reject parts of evolution, they'll say, we can accept evolution for non-humans, but humans are the exception. Fine, okay, fair enough, right? But as I mentioned, even in Sheikh Yasir Qadhi's proposal, you have to believe that he had the right makeup, physiological, genetic makeup, as evolution expected.
Okay, Dr. Shoaib, what is your paradigm when it comes to reconciling evolution and Islam? We have addressed
Uh,
this question, but answer it again.
Yep. My perspective is we cannot. I don't believe you can reject Adam. So you have to accept that Adam and Eve were created miraculously. They didn't have parents. Okay, that's crystal clear, right?
Do you support genetic engineering, and do you think genetically modification humans could lead to human induced evolution? So,
Whether okay,
do you
right.
want
So
this, humans to be the next Terminators, uh, having these superpowers? Do you
right,
support this?
right. So whether engineering is support or not, you have to ask the faqih. That's the first thing. I'm not that. Number two, do you think that could lead to induced evolution? I believe so. I believe it's possible. I don't believe it's impossible.
Okay, so these were the questions till now, and we are waiting for another question. So I have some list of questions other
Yep.
than the evolution, right? Um, which are more in a political perspective. Um, um, where do you see this scientism heading in the next 50 years?
In 50 years, I believe that scientism will. It depends, man. It really depends. If scientism takes over everything, then pretty much religion will slowly be diluted and dissolved. That is my honest opinion. But if we understand the limitations of science and distinguish it from scientism, then perhaps we can then create policies that slow down or pretty much extinguish scientism altogether. But it really depends on social structures, because science is very now tied up to national policy. And the reason why it's tied to national policy is because science is now an instrument for national development. These are two any intricate things.
Do you think that there is a voluntarily force or exertion being applied by some of the countries to make people atheist? Why is it that these atheists have a lot of funding? Um, I mean, why do they propagate atheism when there's no such textbook about it? When they don't have any concept of heaven or hell, right? I mean, for we Muslims, it's totally okay that I want to propagate Islam to someone because I believe that I'm going to go to paradise on this basis, right?
Mhm,
I
mhm.
want him to go to paradise. But what about atheists? I mean, why do they propagate atheism in such a persuasive manner, and why do they have such long necks?
Right. I think that atheism is seen. You have this agenda to save people from religion, right? Matlab, the women who wear niqabs, for instance, we have to give them liberty. We have to give them the choice to take off their clothes, right? The same way, atheism is using that kind of narrative to say to people that, look, this is bevakufi. You don't need to believe in religions, right? You can easily come on our side. And that's why there have been some studies that atheism is using very similar tactics like the come out movement. The come out of the closet. Matlab, if you're gay, you can come out, right? Come out of the closet. So they use the same narrative that you can leave religion, come freedom, intellectual sophistication. This is the side of atheism. So it's a marketing move.
Which
Fundamentally, it's a
which which is superficious and hollow.
yeah, I mean, as you peel down the layers, of course, as a theist, I believe that atheism doesn't have a foundation. That is my position after studying atheism extensively, right? Now, in terms of what motivates them, each person will have their own agenda. Some people are not aggressive. There's some atheists that are incredibly sweet. We had one actually, Professor Michael Ruse, right? He doesn't believe in God, right? He doesn't believe in a God. But one of the sweetest people you will ever have, and you can easily chat with him. Very sweet. Some people like Richard Dawkins are very aggressive. Lawrence Krauss, very aggressive, right? And the reason why that is because they see religion as an enemy of some kind. Now, some
Yeah.
people might say, books, money, fame, all of that comes with the package. Because remember, as soon as he made his publication of God Delusion, right? Boom, millions, right? He sold 1 million books, became a worldwide phenomenon, right? And since then, he's been uphill in terms of the financial ladder of things. So there could be several motivations. In terms of links, I feel that with every minority, there is more pressure on them to reach out, right? Every minority. The difference between atheists and theists is that theists always exist in groups. But Pakistan is majority Muslims, right? UK, there's majority Christians and minority Muslims, right? Everyone has a majority and minority. Now, the minorities will do everything they can to get their rights. Now, because atheists are spread across the world in pockets, they're not in a very concentrated form, the online community is their hub. That's their home. And because of that... Sorry?
They feel connected.
Yes, and that is a narrative online.
They hold online, okay?
Yes.
They feel brotherhood online.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something funny. Okay. By political, I mean the notion of survival of the fittest. This theory has influenced law and legal system in the most Enlightenment era. So the most powerful can lead the world, and you can suppress legitimately the weak one.
Right. So, Sana, I think you've touched on an excellent point. Definitely, evolution has been used for political gain, imperialism, right? Stalinism or Leninism. You can find tons of stuff out there. I can actually even send you a few books that look at this. Evolution, just like everything else in science, unfortunately, has been used for political gain. For instance, I'll give you a very clear example. I found this shocking when I was reading the history of evolution, right? Evolution was first rejected by Christians altogether. I mean, of course, there were a few who accepted it, but most of them, they were, whoa, what is this that you're telling us, right? But once it started getting accepted by the 1920s, 1930s, back then, slavery was still a thing, right? Black people were still being enslaved by the Americans or what have you. Abolitionism didn't, I think, get confirmed later on, right? Slightly later on. Anyways, at that point in time, people were using evolution to justify the difference between black and white people, right? So in slavery systems, black people were always thought to be like these, second class, third class, fourth class citizens. But once evolution came on the scene, they even said that, white people, our lineage comes from Adam. So we are a pure race. But these black people, they don't come from Adam. That's why they're primitive. They're not civilized. So this is a clear case of how science is instrumentalized in a value system. And unfortunately, it happens all the time. You don't need to look into evolution. It happens in science all the time. There was a study called, there was a discipline called phrenology, the size of your brain, right? And phrenology was used to justify why black people had smaller brains. You see? So, unfortunately, biases always will be a part of science, but that doesn't necessarily make the scientific principle problematic. It makes the people who are using it for their gains problematic. I hope that answered the question, Sana.
Okay, we'll take the last question, and that's from one of the administration of Youth Matters. Can being sympathetic to other humans or organisms be the same species be explained by evolution?
So this is not going into evolutionary ethics, right? There are examples of how people or how species started developing emotions, not morality, emotions. And that those emotions became ingrained. So for example, if you hit somebody from a different species, they'll hit you back, right? Now that may be reinforced, do no harm to others and you'll be fine. So there are theories like that. But in philosophy, there is still, this question still has not been addressed. How can you take nature and develop how things ought to be, how things should be? For example, how can I find the moral principle that killing is bad by looking into a test tube? How can I find by dissecting a brain and find out the principle that killing a human being is bad? You cannot. This is known as the Hume's is-out distinction.
Okay, I know that you're getting late, but I would like to take another question, which is a friend of mine. With taste being strong advocates the fact that science and the laws of universe go hand in hand and are driven solely by the fact and reason. Yep. On the other hand, Muslim scientists too have more empirical base and thought when conducting research, knowing that some conclusions may refute some of our theistic teachings. Hence, how can a Muslim reconcile this open-ended dynamic nature of science
Yeah.
And the last question, did you try to contact Richard Dawkins in urge to engage with him in conversation, especially that he and Sam Harris are very hostile with respect to Islam?
Right. Okay. So with regards to the last question, Rashid, thank you everyone for your questions. By the way, I forgot to say thank you. With regards to Rashid, your question, I haven't tried yet, mostly because I'm trying to first establish myself as an academic. And these guys, they have a high ranking public profile. They're not going to talk to people who are still low at the ladder. That's the first thing. Number two, with regards to Mu'min's point that on the one hand, theists like to look at the laws of the universe, and they say that's from God, but then there are these things that they, like miracles, for instance. How do you kind of reconcile these two? The fundamental point here is that we believe God has he allowed laws of nature to exist in the universe? Yes, right? Through which we can do science, right? There's no problem with that whatsoever. But the point here is that the laws of nature are not fixed and set in stone. God is controlling them every single second, every single time. If he wanted to, this very second, right, he is create a monkey in front of my hand right now. That would be a miracle, right? It is in his power to do so. But we don't work with that presumption because God says he has let that order establish. And only when he wanted to assign prophethood, to someone, he gave them miracles to demonstrate to the people. What is our miracle today? It is the linguistic miracle of the Quran. It's not a violation of laws of nature. It is the linguistic miracle of the Quran. So I hope that kind of helps you straddle between the two. Fundamentally, we accept science, but we also accept its limitations. And we do not accept scientism where these laws of nature are fixed and set in stone. That's what makes us and defines us as Muslims. And God knows best.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. Inshallah, we'll invite you again with another topic. I'm extremely thankful that you joined us and gave
Thank you, Barakallahu Feek, for
this
having me.
time. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. And inshallah, you may follow his page. Okay, what's your Facebook ID?
I can give it to you here. 1 second. Just if you can find my name. Just find Shoaib Ahmed Malik and you'll find it.
Okay, and most likely for someone who wants to have an idea or wants to study this subject in detail, you may recommend some of the readings.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.